Krasnodemsky referred to Adam Mishnik. Mishnik, already in the 70s, expressed his opinion on the role of the church in communist society. According to Mishnik, in communist society in Roman society, the Roman Catholic Church has become the guardian of the church, guardian of human and civil rights, as well as the promoter of democratic reforms.
Yes, okay, please.
Therefore, the church is a natural ally of the left secular opposition. There is opposition which does not belong to the church. To Krasnodemsky, this meant that the church could be progressive, although only in totalitarianism. Krasnodemsky said that Mishnik's description of the church as a promoter of democracy has been later, in the 80s, generally accepted. But was this view, the church as promoter of democracy, really generally accepted? Did the whole left secular opposition see the church as their natural ally? At a conference in Bavaria in 1996, Kazimierz Szymanowski remembered a discussion from around 1977. It was a discussion between Adam Mishnik and Erdős Zelensky. Szymanowski reported Adam Mishnik was very enthusiastic about the role played by the church. He was, I would say, enthusiastic in a very youthful manner. Zelensky, who was a little bit older and much more skeptical, said to Adam, play it cool and take it easy. Wait a while longer and you will see what will happen. So there was not only enthusiasm regarding the church's future contribution to democracy, but skeptical as well. Where does this skepticism come from? At a conference in Vienna in 2009, Joachim Pietzsch said that history presented many examples for the church's deep-rooted suspicion towards democracy. In his speech, Pietzsch referred to the remarks of German lawyer Ernst Wolfgang Birkenförde on church and democracy. Already in 1957, Birkenförde wrote about an inner affinity of the church towards authoritarian regimes. However, the church does not feel attracted to every authoritarian regime. The church favors regimes which, according to the church, have a Christian fundament, a Christian basis. To Birkenförde, one example for this affinity was the relation between church and Austrian Dollfuss and Schuschnigg regime 1934. And why does the church favor regimes instead of democracies? Birkenförde's answer is that there is an antinomy contradiction between church and democracy. If the church supports certain political groups in the democracy, then there is the risk that these groups are defeated, that they lose and other groups win. Then it is hard for the church to accept such a defeat, because the church wants to fulfill its vision. So the problem is that the church cannot accept democratic decisions which are contrary to the church's standpoint. But maybe something has changed with the Second Vatican Council. And the mission said that before this council, the church was dominated by traditional thought expressed by French Bishop Jacques Bossuet. Bossuet claimed in the 17th century that a Catholic does not have convictions of his own, that he only must follow the church's convictions. Contrary to this tradition, according to Shin, the teachings of the council have a revolutionary meaning because they stress the autonomy of the political sphere. Michnik quoted the following sentences from Gaudium et Spes, a text of the Second Vatican Council. The church and the political community in their own fields are autonomous and independent from each other. Henryk Boyniszakowski believed that the Second Vatican Council had clarified the relation between church and state. At one time, Boyniszakowski thought that the question of the relation between church and state could be solved entirely, referring also to Gaudium et Spes. In 1996, however, Boyniszakowski had changed his view, calling his former belief a naive and utopian opinion, showing lacking historical awareness. So even after the Second Vatican Council, even after Gaudium et Spes, Birkenford's antinomy between church and state has not disappeared. So how could the church promote democratic reforms, as Michnik said, while being at the same time deeply suspicious against democracy? Was the church from the beginning of the Solidarnosc movement a natural ally of the left secular opposition? According to Władysław Bartoszewski, the church had an invaluable influence on the support of the democratic opposition movement and contributed to the victory of liberty and to the defeat of dictatorship. Elder Chutai, however, wrote that the church, while being a safe haven for democratic opposition in its relation towards Solidarnosc, never directly supported activities aimed against the state. Only around 1989, the church played a significant role by initiating important processes. Who is right now, Bartoszewski or Chutai? Did the church promote democratic reforms right from the start of Solidarnosc, yes or no? To answer this question, I would like to quote from George Weigel's book, The End and the Beginning, on Pope John Paul II. In October 78, Wojtyła became Pope. In the next year, in June, the Pope visited Poland for 9 days. During his visit, the Pope asked God to let Poland be reborn in freedom. Starting with this visit, according to Bible, more and more connections were made between church and left opposition. For Weigel, Solidarnosc was a natural consequence of the Pope's 9 days visit. Not only there were religious services during the strike at the Gdansk shipyard in August 80, Wałęsa also signed the agreement with the government by using a huge pen showing the Pope. This pen was the Pope's present to Wałęsa from 79. In October 80, Tadeusz Mazowiecki, the editor of the Solidarnosc weekly newspaper, visited the Pope in Rome, and in January 81, a whole Solidarnosc delegation was received by the Pope. The Pope said that Solidarnosc is not making new revolution, a revolution different from others, a revolution of the conscience. Bible speaks about the Pope's clear support for Solidarnosc. When martial law was declared in December 81, the Pope was, according to his secretary, sad and surprised and active, very cautiously being anxious not to do or say anything that could make the situation worse. But there was a burning candle in the Pope's window on Christmas Eve of 81. So was Solidarnosc, being the natural consequence of the first Pope's visit to Poland. A creation of the Pope was Solidarnosc, his creator. Andrzej Michalski also stated that there could have been no Solidarnosc without the Church. Especially the Pope's first visit to Poland was one of the decisive factors for the Solidarnosc movement. However, Michalski was of the opinion that the Church was just the mediator between Solidarnosc and government. Gustav Herring-Kruczynski criticized Michalski's view, saying that the Church is a party involved in the conflict. Herring-Kruczynski also stressed that Solidarnosc did not only consist of a Catholic part, but also of a secular one. So I think that although the Pope may have created Solidarnosc, it was not entirely his creature, as there were also many non-Catholics in it. Michalski also stated that even among Solidarnosc activists, there were some not willing to obey the Church. In a discussion with the Bishop Tadeusz Pieronek in 1996, Adam Michnik warned against the wrong impression that Polish tradition is only made by the Church. He told his audience that in 1979, Kazimierz Dziewanowski and others wrote a letter to the Pope after his first visit to Poland. Dziewanowski criticized the Pope in Warsaw, while highlighting the Polish spirit in history. Did not mention with a single word the Poles who had achieved great merits, but were not Catholics. So I would say that the Church was the promoter of Solidarnosc, at least between 79 and 81. But did the Church, by promoting Solidarnosc, support democratic reforms as well? The 21 demands from August 80 ask for free trade unions and for freedom of expression and for freedom of the press. The words democracy or democratic do not appear. But a real democracy must guarantee human rights like freedom of expression. So we could say that the demands from 80 are predecessors of call for democracy, and when in January 81 the Pope spoke of a revolution which Solidarnosc should make, what else than democracy was on his audience's mind? Not only did the Church promote Solidarnosc, by doing so, the Church promoted democratic reforms as well. However, when democracy in Poland had been realized, the Pope wrote in Veritatis Splendor from 93 the following words quoted by Michnik. Today, when many countries have seen the fall of ideologies, there is no less grave a danger that the fundamental rights of the human person will be denied. This is the risk of an alliance between democracy and ethical relativism. As history demonstrates, a democracy without values easily turns into open or thinly disguised totalitarianism. Michnik noted that many members of the Polish Catholic Church had engaged themselves for democracy. However, in 1996, it seemed to him that they had lost their interest in democracy. Some were, according to Michnik, afraid of the ill-fated gift of freedom, feeling nostalgia for the good old times. 10 years ago, Krzysztof Seession presented the Solidarnosc paradox. May I quote his formula, although the Solidarnosc mass movement was a decisive impulse behind the collapse of communism in Poland. The ideological legacy of Solidarnosc affected the transformations to a fairly limited extent. According to Seession, which legacy of Solidarnosc was left beside? His answer: the idea of a self-governing Republic of Poland was abandoned. The ideology and praxis of direct democracy, union actions aimed at protection of workers' interests, and postulated social order based on self-management. Already in 1991, Bronisław Geremek had stated that the vision of society organizing itself is a guide for activities. Keremik also said that the destruction of communism and the recovery of freedom are not sufficient conditions for the birth of a democracy. Democracies are built only over time through the growth of a democratic political culture. So how can we explain that Solidarnosc was so strong in defeating communism, but so weak in realizing its vision of a self-governing republic? An explanation could be that the church allied with Solidarnosc just to dominate the new state, without having true interest in realizing the far-reaching democratic and participatory aims of Solidarnosc. In the past, it has often been said that the church is striving for a theocracy in Poland instead of democracy. For example, Niklaus Rokowicz told us that Leszek Kowalski repeatedly warned against a theocracy in Poland, built by the church after 1889. In 1991, Nobel Prize winner Czesław Miłosz asked in the headline of his essay whether Poland is a theocratic state, answering that the clergy has such a program. Even Catholic priest Joseph Tischner remarked that the fears of Kowalski and Miłosz are not unfounded. To Tischner, the church in Poland is indeed a problem, saying that the church is aiming at some form of a confessional state. But when did the church in Poland begin to long for a confessional state? Only after 1889 or before, during the alliance with Solidarnosc in the early 80s. Ireneusz Krzemiński distinguished three periods of the alliance between church and Solidarnosc. Before martial law was declared, the voice of the church was just one voice among others. In the societal debate, while after the introduction of martial law, the church became the only voice. After the end of martial law, the virtually democratic relation between church and society changed, as well as the relations within the church itself. The latter adopted a more hierarchy and a more hierarchy and more authoritarian character. So my last question is, how can a hierarchical and authoritarian church support the growth of a really democratic culture that Keremik and Seession had in mind? Now is this one. Rokowicz said that Michnik had reminded the Polish church again and again of tasks which the church did not seem to take seriously, especially committing itself to a democratic, orthodox state and law, following the Western European model. This is a very clear judgment. Thank you very much.